Free-to-play. So probably one of the most important things is the audience that you have, because that's the basis for making money on free-to-play. And, oh, sorry, wrong button. And on your audience, through engagement, you will build retention. And that's very important to build good engagement and retention, because that's what builds monetization. So the bigger the audience, the longer you retain your users, then the more money you will make. And you will notice that every game has a different profile regarding how they monetize. Like, for example, there are some games that have very early monetization, investment purchase, and some other need a lot of engagement before they actually bring the money. And of course, it's really important to grow this audience. And what's the best way to do it is through virality, because it's free. And of course, there's also acquisition, which is also another side of growing this audience that's very important. So, and when you think of production, if you want to build success, then first you have to focus on building engagement and retention, then virality to grow your audience, and if you have that, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to monetize and have good acquisition. That's just time and effort. All right, so you all agree with that? Yeah? Right, yeah. Okay, so when you think about the business, it all comes down to a simple equation. How much does it cost to actually get the user playing the game versus how much does a single user bring to a game during all his lifetime in the game? So that's a concept we call the lifetime player value. Still a very classical approach for free-to-play. All right, so, but what's important is that there are lots of things you can do to actually alleviate the acquisition cost. For example, the free acquisition through virality, which is very important. Using a license can also prove very efficient, because not only will bring the people that are passionate about the license, but also it will make your acquisition much cheaper. Because, you know, if you see an ad that's Star Wars, you're like, oh, wow, maybe I'll try that. So it's much cheaper to do acquisition with a license. Store support being featured, of course, is a must. And of course, PR. And on the other side of the balance, if you want to make the big bucks, then you have to build engagement, retention, and monetization. Very classic. So what's really important is that when your acquisition cost, on average, is less than the money that you can make on average for one user, means that you are making money for every user that you actually acquire. So just pour in the millions, because that's a money maker, right? All right, so if you're not familiar with all these concepts, I recommend reading this book. It's a very small book. It's very interesting, and it presents free-to-play concept in a very practical way. It's called Free-to-Play, Making Money from Games You Give Away, from Will Lutton. So that's pretty much it for free-to-play. Any questions so far? No question on free-to-play? Right. Okay, so now let's dive into analytics. So from our experience at Playsoft, I would say that there are basically two big uses of analytics. The first use is to monitor business performance. And most of the companies I've crossed so far only use analytics for this side. It's like, you know, they have a dashboard, and at some point they know that something is wrong because they are losing users, or so they know that something is wrong. It's like Batman, you know, they have this big bat sign in the sky, so something is happening with, so something is wrong. But then, what's wrong? How do you fix it? That's the real question, right? And you know, I've ever wondered, like, how does Batman know what the problem is when he sees the Batman sign? Does anybody know? No, that's a mystery, right? So there is a second kind of analytics which are more fond of, which is analytics that is really action-oriented. Analytics that lets you analyze, give a diagnostic about what's wrong in your game, and give you the key to know what kind of actions to take in the game. And these analytics must be manufactured to optimize, to guide production efforts, really. It's like, it's not something that's only marketing, it's also production-oriented. So what I've seen in many projects is that we couldn't really use analytics, although a lot of time and effort was spent on it, because of those 4 reasons. Poor implementation of tagging plans. They didn't tag the right thing, right? Lack of trust in results, like, you know, any kind of findings that we have, a big finding, like everybody is purchasing in the first week, like, for example. Oh no, there must be something wrong with the analytics, right? So maybe the developer screwed, or maybe you got the data wrong, or anything. So we don't trust this data, and that's a real problem. We can't act on it because it really often happens that it's not trustworthy. So you can get useful information. That's also, yeah, I see somebody nodding. Who faced these kind of problems in the past? Just now? Nobody? All right. Can get useful information, like typically, let's say, for example, you are tracking the event in-app purchase, right? That's a very simple event to track. Like, everybody knows that you have to track your in-app purchase, right? But then, what do you purchase when you make an in-app purchase? You purchase a currency pack, right? But what's important is not the currency pack you purchased. So what's really important is not the currency pack itself. It's what you purchase it for, right? You purchase the big pack in order to buy this new character in the game. That's what is important. So we don't get the useful information because we are not tracking the right thing. And then, of course, there is the last problem, which is that no action is taken, like no budget for changes after. So I've seen so many projects doing that I felt like I need to do a talk around that. And of course, if you do that, the little devil will come and eat your revenue. All right. So why is it happening this way? Most of the time, the team gets to do analytics, and the process they will follow is that they will list all the events in the game, all they can think of, and you know, like we have in-app purchase. That's an important event in the game. What can we track when an event in-app purchase happens? Well, of course, the package that was purchased. So they are thinking the wrong way. Like, they are thinking about what they can track instead of the information that they need. And I will show you the process I propose next. So they are like finding things to track and implementing the tags, and then, you know, it's a side thing in the production, and then it gets you wrong data. And then when suddenly they start thinking, they get the data, and they start to build a graphic, and then suddenly the problems come. Because, you know, analytics packages are quite complicated. Like, they have limitation, which we will discuss a little bit later on. And oftentimes it happens that you can't display the data that you need in a way that is really interesting and insightful. So, whoops, oh no, we're screwed. But never mind, we had no budget for changes anyway. So that's what's happening on the ground there, very often, too often. All right. So that's not a healthy way to actually handle analytics. So what I propose is that and what we have started to do at Playsoft is having a new healthy approach about analytics. First of all, we need to think, before we actually implement anything, before time and budget is spent. We have to think about what we really need. Then making sure the tagging is right and proper and tested. That's very important. And then having this phase of soft launch and iteration makes sure that budget is reserved for this part of production. And when you launch, you are pretty much sure about what you have. So, thinking, all right. So here is how we go about thinking about what we need at Playsoft. First thing we ask ourselves is, what kind of business questions do we have? Like we all know the big fundamentals for free-to-play. We saw that in the first few slides. So it's engagement, retention, monetization, virality, acquisition. So all of these need to have a more specific question. Let's take one, for example. Let's take retention. So what's important when you retain people, when you try retaining people? Well, of course, what's very important is to know when and why people leave the game, right? If you don't ask yourself this question at the beginning of the production, when you are building the tagging plan, you will never get this information. For a simple reason is that when somebody leaves, it doesn't produce any events in the game, right? And to be tracked in analytics package, a user needs to produce events in the game so that you can count something. So you have to find another way to think about it. So developing business question and then, trying to make hypotheses about what can go wrong with that. Like for example, people are leaving. That's my business question. Why and when are they leaving? And then make hypotheses like maybe they are leaving because the game is too difficult. Maybe they are stuck somewhere. How can I track that? How can I spot the problem in the game? And then once you're done with these sub-questions, it will get very practical. And you will pretty much know what kind of graphic you will need. Like for example, let's say I can't retain people because they are dropping during a tutorial. That's a common problem. So what can we do? How can we track that? Then probably we'll need to build like a funnel graphics, meaning at each very step of the tutorial, knowing how many people are playing the game, reach a specific step in the tutorial. And when you see a drop, that's the culprit. I have an example on that. For example, on our game, Blade Lords, which is a 3D fighting game, free to play, we found that we had, in the early funnel, a drop of 30% of players, suddenly between two steps of the funnel. And we discovered that it was because to trigger a special move, we required the player to hold the special move button. And holding is not a good thing to have in a game because it's not a natural interaction. People can tap, slide, but holding a button, not a very good idea. So we removed that, and that's 30% more people playing the game. And of course, the earlier you are in the game, the worst is the mistake because people are not engaged at all in the game, right? So, graphics mockup, relevance check to make sure that it really is useful. And then you have to take into account the limits of the analytics package, which I discuss a little bit later. And by the way, our experience is more based on Flurry. And we tried other ones, but Flurry is free. So I'll discuss a little bit later about limitation in Flurry. So then you have to fight with your team to actually make sure that the game is tagged right. It needs to be developed right, it needs to be implemented correctly, and it needs to be tested. And when I say it needs to be tested, it means that you need somebody from your QA to actually look at the logs of your game and make sure when an event is thrown that it appears in the logs with the correct parameter values. It is very important. If you don't do this step, like for example, on some project, what we did is, somebody playing, and then later on we look at the logs and see if we have the events. This doesn't work. You really need somebody to take step by step and checking every single tag in your tagging plan. Is everybody familiar with the tagging plan concept? Who doesn't know? No? Okay. Let me do a very quick jump to a later slide, this one, just to explain how a typical analytics package works. So you have your game here, and you have your game logic, and every once in a while, an event happens in the game, like for example, the player makes an in-app purchase, and the developer will include a call to the analytics API here, which will throw this little guy here, which is an event. And that's what we call an event. And the tagging plan is actually the specifications for how events need to be included in the game. Some documents saying that when an in-app purchase is triggered, then you have to report this event with these parameters, and the typical values are this and this. So for example, here, when you have an in-app purchase, you have an event, and the parameters will be maybe number of sessions played. It's very interesting to know what kind of package was purchased depending on how engaged the player is in the game. So number of sessions played is a good indicator of the player engagement. And yeah, just to finish this graph, which is quite interesting, I think, is that so the API will actually stack all the events that are thrown by the game logic, and then every once in a while, it will actually upload those events to a server. So that's the server side. For Flurry, for example, I think it's done on end of session before the application is killed. But it can also be done if it fails, it will be re-triggered at application startup. And when the events arrive at the server, they are kept in a raw format for a while. But then a little while later, they are aggregated. Because, like for example, a game can throw maybe 100 events per session, per user. So imagine if you multiply the number of MAU by this volumetry, it's going to get huge very quickly. So there is no, I mean, for analytics package, usually they don't keep that for long. Like they will only keep it for a few hours, and then they will aggregate the data and put it in the database, only keeping the counts. And yeah, I'll discuss that a little bit later. And then when you use the web interface of the analytics package like Flurry, you will actually only see the aggregated data. You will rarely have access to the raw events, at least not for the whole period you're considering, only maybe for the last few hours. And by the way, this step here, aggregation, is a batch for developers. It's done asynchronously on a scheduled times. So that's why usually you have a lag between the time the events are reported and the time when they are available there. Also, another interesting thing is that sometimes the client here will lose network before end of session. And the events won't be reported at once. But then, during next session, those events are not lost, and they will be sent later on. So what you will see, like for example in Flurry, is that the data for the last few weeks is very unreliable, because a lot of people actually have not reported their events yet, because they played offline. But then when they get back online, it's reported back. So a lot of things, a little tricks you realize when you work with those solutions. Is that clear for how, yeah? Any question on that? No? Right. So let me go back. So when you have your specifications for what kind of events you want to track and what parameters you need to have, then you need to make sure it's implemented right. Very important. And then rodeo. You do the soft launch, meaning that you actually launch your game in a small country, or typically, like for example, you would launch in Canada for the US, or for example, if you target France, you will go to Belgium or a smaller country, but that's which has a similar consumption habits, and then you will run your analytics. And you have findings. Findings, like for example, everybody starts playing by purchasing this one-time beginners pack, for example, which is an interesting way to encourage people starting playing. Well, the bigger the finding, the bigger is the need for cross-checking the finding. For example, if your finding is that everybody purchases in the game in the first week, how can you actually make sure that your graph is correct? There may still be mistake, right? So maybe you can cross-check by maybe checking the difference between acquisition curves and revenue number of in-app purchase curve, and see that there is a big correlation, meaning that there's no lag between purchase and so that's this kind of cross-check you can do very easily, and will make you very confident in the quality of the data that you have. How much time do we have? Yeah, but what's time? Just to make sure. And oh, okay, right, that's fine. All right, so. And then, of course, when you're confident, you can launch the game, and you're ready for success. All right, a few tips and tricks. So this I discussed already. Here is an unreadable slide. Sorry for that. But I guess when you get back in your office, you can download the slide and read this again in detail. And it's very important to understand this, because that's what's mostly preventing people from getting good results, at least with Flurry. There are huge limits in analytics package, probably less in paid packages. I don't know if there is somebody from other solutions here. No, I've seen them around, so you can check with them. But if you're using Flurry, you will be limited in 300 events types. Like, for example, 300 different event names. So the event can be thrown as many times as you want in the application, but you cannot track more than 300 different events. Then you have only 10 parameters per event. So if you want to track more than 10 things, you can do it. Or the only way to do it is actually split that into events. Like, let's say, for example, one of the events that we had, which was tricky, was start of session. It's an interesting event because it's only thrown once per session, so you can get data that is almost linked to number of users. If you track that, then maybe you'll feel the need to actually split the events into a few sub-events, and then track more than 10 parameters. Then, because of aggregation, what Flurry will do is actually it will track only 500 different values. Like, for example, if you track the number of sessions to first in-app purchase, it will only hold 500 different values. And then the 501st one will be other. So it will aggregate everything else in other, which is, we can be very bad because, like, for example, well, maybe not for a number session, but let's say a time played. If you track the parameter time played, it's very analogic in nature. Like you can get to 3, 5, 10 hours, but then there are a lot of different values in between, right? So if you do that, the farther you get, the worse it gets to actually aggregate the values correctly. So if you want to prevent this problem, you have to define discrete values and code the events correctly in your game so that they are reported with discrete values. Like, for example, if it's time played, you will have every minute until 20 minutes, then every 5 minutes until 5 hours, and then every hour. And then this will make sure that you don't have too many values that will be removed because they get aggregated. All right. Then for parameters, the problem is that you don't have unique users. You only have an average. Well, it's almost unusable. So for this, well, my recommendation is that you actually create an event that happens only once in the game. For example, in a fighting game, we have various boss in the game, and you can actually fight them only once. And then we made an event that is boss defeated, and it can happen only once. And then in this case, you will not get a number of event occurrences, but you will get number of users because they are the same. Because it only happened once per user. Did I lose you or no? That's fine. All right. Okay. Another big problem is that you cannot cross-analyze parameter values. For example, let's say you have a parameter that is level ID, 1 to 20, and a second parameter that is number of fights won, for example. You cannot create a graph that displays number of fight lost per level because there are two different parameters, and because of aggregation, the connection between both have been lost. So if you want to cross-analyze things like that, you have to actually take one of the parameters and put it in the name of the event or in the name of the parameter. For example, in our fighting game, we have boss defeated as the event, and as the parameter name, we have the boss ID, boss 1, boss 2, boss 3, boss 4, and then the value of the parameter is the number of fights that you've done until you defeated the boss. So it gives you an idea of how much grind there is before you can defeat a boss, which is quite interesting. All right, so there is a lag on consolidation process, and yeah, another problem is that values are consolidated are calendar aggregates. Like, for example, you will get monthly values, but only for calendar months. You will get values from January, for February, etc. Not for 1 month until today. It's calendar month. So that's the kind of limitation you have to work with. So in order to move away from those limitations, one thing that you can do is actually retrieve the raw data yourself. It is extremely powerful because you will have no aggregation, and you will have all the events that any user has actually triggered in your game. Of course, you will have the same problem that the analytics package have, that you will have huge volumetry. But this can be solved by, for example, sampling the population, only taking a few people, maybe the most interesting people who paid, for example, which we need to track more specifically. And there is even in Flurry, there is an extraction function that lets you actually retrieve a CSV file, and then you can put it in Excel or in a database and then do whatever you want to with it. And then when you have that, you can find correlations between parameter values. You can backtrack from a finding to real events from users. Like, let's say, I've seen that people have purchased at 1 minute gameplay in the game. So who is this user? What's his kind of behavior in the game? You can do that. You can go back to all the events that the player has triggered, and then try to understand what's happening. It will also be very helpful to detect problems in the game. Like, for example, if the game crashes, you will see end of sessions happening somewhere it shouldn't happen, stuff like that. And if you do that, I highly recommend that you actually use a player unique identifier. So you may know that it's forbidden to use the IDFA, which is the marketing-oriented unique identifier. But it doesn't matter, actually. Just generating a random number and keeping it the same from one session to another makes it possible to track the person from one session to another and follow his behavior throughout his lifetime in the game. And then, yeah, that was what was there. All right, so yeah, just one more thing about what raw data lets you do. It will let you actually analyze the distribution in how the values happen in the game. For example, let's say we have here a graph that shows first purchase in the game, and number of players here in y-axis, and in x-axis, the number of sessions played. So as you can see, this is a distribution where we see that people make the first purchase very early on. But through traditional analytics, you won't get this information, because you will only get an average, a minimum, and a maximum. So there's no information on distribution. So what can you do with that? I mean, you know that people on average do actually make their first purchase at level 30 on average. But then you don't know on what level they start doing it and what level they stop doing it. So you can't do anything on your game because you don't know where you can act. Another way to actually do that is by using rank-based aggregates. The most well-known is the median. So basically, you take all the parameter values, number of sessions, and you rank them. And then you will pick the value that is at 10% of the players, which will give you the lower decile. For example, here it's 11. So this value means that 10% of the players are making their first purchase before 11 sessions, which is very interesting. So meaning that for you, if you act on your game, there's no point in doing things before level session 11. So you have a game where you have like a week of engagement before people pay. And so forth with quartile, 16, and median, which is 50% of players, upper quartile, and upper decile. So when you have all this bracket over there, you have a much more meaningful information because you know where you should target your actions in the game. But you will only be able to get those values if you have raw data. All right. So, any question on that? No? All right. Okay, so just to finish off, I've included here as a bonus the list of things we do track at Playsoft on a typical basis. Check the time. All right. So about retention, we track the earlier retention funnel, which I already discussed, like every single short step in the tutorial. It's really important. I've put in bold the one I think are the most important. It's really important because people who start playing your game, they haven't built the engagement yet. They have maybe just downloaded the game, and they don't know what kind of game it is. And if they are stuck in any way, they will drop immediately and kill your, remove your app immediately. So this is probably the most important thing. If you're not doing it right now, you should start doing it right away. So basically, number of people reaching every single small step in the first step in the game. Then we have the game progression retention funnel. So it means like what level did you reach in the game, and how many people reached that specific level in the game. So looking at that, you will probably notice that on some levels you will have drops. Maybe it's not done correctly. Maybe there's a bug, or maybe there is it's difficult, it's too easy. Explain churn. This one is very important, but it's probably the hardest thing to track, because as I said, when a player drops, he will not produce events because he's not playing anymore, right? And the only thing that you can do in an analytics package is track events, count events. So when you don't have events, how do you actually do anything with it? So there is a way, even without the raw data, to actually track that, which is to actually build a cohort of users. So users who did not trigger the start of session event, the package will create a segment for you. You select this segment. I think in Fleur it's called cohorts. And then you will and then you move back to the month or weeks before that, and you will be able to get some data from there. Engagement. So let me skip through all these steps, and I can expand if you have questions. So what's very important there is about being able to act on level design. That's really something you can quickly do something about it. Like if a level is not balanced correctly, you need to get this information back to the level designer and have them modify the levels. That's very important. About virality, of course there's number of connections, but what's most interesting is how many requests do you produce? Do you actually give opportunity to share or to invite people frequently enough? Or do you need to do more? Or is it worthwhile for the player to actually do it? So all this comes into the virality part. And the monetization, I talked about it many times. The single most common mistake is to actually only track the currency package that you purchase. It's useless. There is no, I mean, it's only useful for pricing, but for acting on the game, it's completely useless. What's very important is that you track what people are interested in, the virtual good that people purchase with this currency. And when you have this information, there is a lot of things you can do. You can create a promotion, you can maybe create similar products. You can really act when you have this information. Yeah, and then acquisition is with cohorts. So yeah, I think so. That's pretty much it. So in conclusion, if you use a healthy approach, you should grow. Maybe not in the right way, but all right. So, and if you have questions, further questions, or you want to talk, you can contact me at this address. Okay. Any questions? Yeah, questions. Yes. Right.
How did you discover exactly that the holding was the problem? Was it just the drop off on that particular step and you just looked with common sense if you should change it or not? Or did you actually have events on the page itself to identify, I don't know, duration? Or was it like held at all or not?
No, we didn't have this kind of detail. So, I've very often heard people saying that they track everything. It's not possible to track everything because if you track too much, you get a lot of volumetry. It's very hard to get to analyze it and to request it and to get some useful information. So we are not tracking every button press, if that's your question. But we are very finely tracking the number of users who reach the step. So, and the tutorial is like you have to make block a move from your opponent. Then you have to do, trigger a special move, and then you have to hit with a big move. And so there's no question about what can be happening between both, because there's only that, actually. So, and it needs to be designed for the early funnel, I think, in this level of detail. Like, you know which feature, which exact step of the early funnel will cause a problem. Yeah. And by the way, there was actually a problem that this event was not tagged. And for like a month, I was wondering, because actually it was the other way around. Like, you had to hit the opponent, and then you had to block a move. And we had a drop between both. And we were like, but it's strange, because block is automatic, and so there's nothing special about it. And then I played again the tutorial, and I saw that they forgot the step. So that's one of the classical mistakes. That, yeah. All right, yeah.
You talked about the soft launch in the beginning, and you also mentioned like Belgium as an interesting country. What's your opinion on where you should plan your soft launch? We launched a game, for example, in Belgium, but a lot of people are choosing Canada or Australia for a soft launch. Have you noticed any difference in choosing the country? Does it really matter, or is it just okay if it's just the Western market if you're planning to go there? Or
yeah, I think the country matters. And actually, I said that you should soft launch in Belgium if you aim at a French launch, okay. Yeah. Because in Belgium they speak French. They have consumption habits that are very close to us. So, yeah. But if you aim at the US, for example, I don't think that Belgium would be a very good pick. You should probably work with Canada or Australia.
Yeah, and for example, what would you prefer if you would do a French game, for example? Would you prefer doing it in the French part of Canada, or would you prefer to do it in Belgium?
I think Belgium is better.
Because it's smaller, or
because that's part of Europe, and in Canada they have much more like US kind of consumption habits, I think. But another finding we had doing soft launch is that acquisition is extremely expensive in Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's because everybody soft launches in Canada. So for a US launch, I would actually advise going to Australia.
Yeah, okay, but I heard that Australia is also becoming expensive.
Yeah, of course, everybody like. But I mean, Canada is a very small country, so everybody's soft launching there. It makes the prices for acquisition very crazy.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And it's hard also to get volumetry. That's a big concern. Like even if you put a high price, you will only get like 10 players a day. There's something I didn't talk about is about how many people you will need to get in values with a good error margin. So and we have made the scientific calculation on that, and what we found is that if you have a value that is where you can accept a mistake by 4 or 5 points, you can work with 1,000 users, and you will get a good value. But if you are working with values which are like 1-2%, then you will need like 10,000 players. Yeah. So, and that's quite a big investment.
Yeah, we noticed when we soft launched the game in Belgium as well. Then what we noticed is that in the beginning we had not that much users. The retention wasn't that high, but eventually got a lot better once we reached like
Yeah.
And we did change some things in the game, but not that much. That was
Hmm.
basically the reason for
Yeah.
changing the retention. So
Because if you want with 90% certainty an error mistake not more than 1%, you need 10,000 people.
yeah.
So for KPI that have a very small range, like for example conversion rates and stuff like that, you know, when even 0.5% makes the difference in the world, you have to have more players.
I guess for retention, around 1,000 users should be.
Yeah, for retention, you don't need that much. Actually, even 100 people will detect the major mistakes in your game. So probably in the first iteration in your soft launch, you can have a first iteration with only 100 users, and then go to 1,000, and then 10,000. Yeah.
I had a question. Could you go back to the previous slide with the KPIs?
The what? Which one?
The virality. Yeah, two forward.
one?
And one more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So under the virality section, could you just explain in more detail what you mean by requests, produced, transformed, and posts?
So basically, two things you try to do when you, for example, you try to add Facebook virality to your game, is to bring new people, right? So in order to bring somebody new in your game, you have to do two things. The first thing is that you will have to have the player send a request to a friend. So that's a request produced. And then you will have the friend to accept.
So it's the acquisition piece of it.
Yeah,
okay.
That's the, and for the, and it's important to have both actually, because a request that is not appealing for your friend will not convert and will not bring the person back. So it's quite important.
Thank you.
Any other questions? One more.
Also about another slide.
This one?
Yeah, you said like currency packages are pretty useless unless you know what people are interested in. So what's the difference? Like if you say like, okay, I know that they're interested in germs, and then
no.
You need to make
what's
it
important
payable,
is
no?
what virtual good they purchase with the currency, because it's the virtual good that people purchase with the currency. Like, for example, let's say that you purchase a pack of hard currency. Did you purchase that to buy a new character, or make an upgrade, or just to speed up something? So and you know, that's where the link is. Sorry, between analytics and actually things you can do in production. If you don't have this information about what product actually sell, what virtual good actually sell, then it's hard to actually target your production efforts. And of course, you can tell me that, we could have an event like a virtual good purchased. But in my opinion, purchasing a virtual good with free currency is not the same thing at all than purchasing with a monetization currency, you see, through InApp Purchase. And another very important event, in my opinion, is first purchase. First purchase, because if you are playing free-to-play games, you probably notice that usually people don't want to play for free. That's the idea. And then once they start paying once, it will be much easier to have them pay again, because the game gets important for them, right? The game has more value in their eyes. So this first purchase is extremely important. And at Playsoft, we are doing a lot to actually trigger this first purchase, and making sure this happens as soon as possible in the game.
So the first purchase should be cheap.
Depends on your game. Depends on your. For example, if you take a game like Clash of Clans, their first purchase it's I think almost $5. But if you take like Candy Crush, they have a very smaller pricing, and they want to appeal to a wider casual audience, which they don't want to frighten with big purchase. So it's really different depending on what you want to do with your marketing. I mean, with your monetization. Maybe you can get more money by having higher price points, like in Clash of Clans, or maybe you can having more money by having more people buying, right? And it's all in the mix. So you could do A/B testing, yeah, yeah. And we haven't done that much, but I know, like for example, Amazon, they have a solution in their API to do that. So, and there are various APIs to do that as well.
So also, my last question, is it the best thing to have like lots of, if you buy like stuff, like lots of gems, or not, like if you, do you need to work like in thousands of stars or eggs or whatever, or points that you can buy, or is it easier to have like a few, like that you, that's also, because like if you calculate stars in the millions or 10,000s, if you have a lot, or what's the best thing to do?
So the question is it better to have a few big purchases or a lot of small purchases?
Yeah, exactly.
I think both approach make sense. It will all very much depend on your audience. For example, if you are on a niche product, if you, for example, for us, fighting games, it's like a niche product. We also have a big cycling game, Tour de France, on iOS and Android. And what we see is that this audience are hardcore players, and it's better in that for that audience you will get more money if you have higher price points. Whereas the more casual the audience, probably the lower price points you should have to, don't scare people off. So yeah, depends on the game, I guess. But I'm not the big specialist on that. I mean, I'll just, yeah, A/B testing also goes a long way. But one of the problems we had with A/B testing is that, especially on iOS, when you have when you want to make A/B testing on in-app purchase, you have to create different in-app purchase, and each time you create one, you have to validate, go through the Apple validation, and it's like 3 times longer if you actually include new in-app purchase. So, yeah. So we didn't do that much. Did you have experience on that? Okay. Yeah. All right. Any more questions? No? Yeah, one more?
We've got 3 minutes left. So.
All right, thank you.
So
you were saying how it's difficult to track churn because it doesn't trigger any in-game events because the user is not playing anymore.
Yeah. So
when you go back to players that have unlocked for a while, what sort of behavior are you looking for?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm gonna try to make it short. I think you have to build hypotheses for why the people are leaving, there's no limit into building hypotheses, but probably some are more relevant than other ones. One I found interesting is how many amounts, what was the amount of currency the player had when they left. So it's not the same thing somebody that stops playing with leaving currency there or the number of things the player could buy when he left. So that's one of the things that can be interesting. Another thing is how many times he lost just before he left, because he was very tired of losing and then he left. Or this kind of thing, you have to build all the hypotheses for why he could be leaving. Another thing you can do is actually, if you have the raw data, you can try to find a few users and look at their sessions and try to understand what's happening. But most of the time, probably a user will be leaving because they are not excited. So maybe what you can have to actually act on it would be to know where people left. And then maybe you can add a feature to make the game most exciting. At, like, if you see that the people are leaving at level 10, then maybe at level 9 you will have this big exciting feature that keeps people, or maybe you will have some big gain at level 11 or something like that.
So that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
So
thank you.
You can download the content from the Game Connection website. All the slides will be there, or you can contact Maxime by email as well. I'm sure he'll be pleased to continue the conversation. And you can mark the session by clicking on the various smileys at the back of the room.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure it will continue afterwards.